Critics sit in cushioned theaters judging realism they've never lived. Meanwhile, veterans watch the same films and see their nightmares reflected back. Here are 12 war movies that sparked a brutal divide between professional reviewers who called them inaccurate, exploitative, or propagandistic, and the soldiers who served and said these films finally got it right. The gap between critique and combat experience has never been wider. Number 12. The Outpost, 2020. Most people scrolled past this one on streaming, and mainstream critics barely noticed it existed. The Outpost landed with almost zero fanfare, despite depicting one of the most intense battles of the Afghanistan war at Combat Outpost Keating. Critics who bothered reviewing it dismissed the film as just another forgettable military action flick with shaky cam chaos and one-dimensional soldier stereotypes. They complained it glorified combat, without examining why American troops were even stationed in such an indefensible valley location surrounded by mountains. Veterans who fought in Afghanistan had the opposite reaction entirely. They flooded forums and social media praising the film's brutal authenticity, specifically how it captured the confusion, the impossible odds, and the raw terror of being pinned down in a location everyone knew was a death trap. Soldiers who served at remote outposts recognized the cramped living conditions, the constant threat, and the bureaucratic insanity of orders from commanders far removed from reality. The Battle of Kamdesh, where 8 Americans died defending an outpost that was abandoned shortly after, became a symbol of strategic failure. The film didn't shy from showing that contradiction. Director Rod Lurie worked closely with survivors to ensure details like radio chatter, weapon malfunctions, and the chaos of coordinated Taliban attacks felt genuine. Former soldiers praised specific moments like troops scrambling for ammunition and the desperate attempt to recover fallen brothers under fire. For those who lived it, The Outpost wasn't entertainment. It was testimony. Number 11. Lone Survivor, 2013. Critics accused Lone Survivor of being jingoistic propaganda wrapped in excessive slow-motion violence. They argued Peter Berg's film reduced a complex mission into a simplistic tale of American heroism, while dehumanizing Afghan villagers and Taliban fighters into faceless enemies. The film's portrayal of Operation Red Wings became controversial before it even premiered, with reviewers claiming it manipulated audiences into patriotic fervor, without questioning the mission's planning or execution failures that led to disaster. Navy SEALs and Special Operations veterans defended the film fiercely. They pointed out that Marcus Luttrell, the real survivor whose book inspired the movie, consulted throughout production and insisted on accuracy regarding tactics, equipment, and the horrific decisions his team faced. The most debated scene, where the SEAL team debates whether to kill or release goat herders who stumbled upon their position, sparked intense discussion about rules of engagement. Critics called it manipulative, veterans called it the impossible moral calculus of warfare. The film's depiction of the team's fall down a mountain, portrayed through brutal tumbling sequences, was criticized as over-the-top. Combat medics and operators who reviewed the film stated those falls were accurate and actually understated the trauma. The movie made over $200 million worldwide, but the real victory for supporters was how it sparked conversations about operator sacrifice. Afghan villager Mohammed Gulab, who protected Luttrell, later disputed some details, adding another layer of complexity. Veterans argue the film captured emotional truth, even if every tactical detail wasn't perfect, and that distinction matters more than critics understood. Number 10. Black Hawk Down, 2001. Ridley Scott's visceral recreation of the Battle of Mogadishu became a critical flashpoint. Reviewers praised the technical filmmaking but condemned the movie for stripping away political context, reducing Somali people to indistinguishable enemies, and focusing solely on American casualties while ignoring the estimated 1,000 Somali deaths. Critics argued the film was dangerous propaganda that glamorized military intervention without examining the mission's purpose or the colonial implications of American forces in Somalia. Some called it racist for failing to develop any Somali characters beyond militia fighters, Rangers and Delta Force operators who fought in Mogadishu in October 1993 saw something completely different on screen. They praised the film's recreation of urban combat's confusion, the radio communication breakdowns, and the desperate nature of the rescue operation when helicopters went down in hostile territory. Veterans highlighted specific details like the convention center staging area, the dust and heat, and the way ammunition runs low in extended firefights. The film's decision to focus tightly on the American experience wasn't jingoism to them, but an accurate representation of how soldiers experience combat in the moment. You don't analyze geopolitics while bullets tear through walls around you. The cast trained with actual Rangers, and soldiers noted the accurate portrayal of small unit tactics and the brotherhood that emerges under fire. Technical advisors included men who were there, and their input shows in scenes like the defense of the first crash site. The debate exposes a fundamental disconnect between those who judge war films through political and ethical lenses versus those who evaluate combat authenticity. Both perspectives have merit, but veterans argue critics mistake narrow tactical focus for ideological blindness. Number 9. Restrepo, 2010. This documentary followed a platoon in Afghanistan's Korangal Valley for a year, and critics praised its immersive cinematography while complaining it provided zero context about the war's purpose, Afghan perspectives, or strategic objectives. Reviewers argued the film's refusal to include expert commentary or historical background made it incomplete journalism that simply embedded audiences with soldiers without questioning the mission. Some critics felt the documentary exploited the death of soldier Juan Restrepo without examining why he died or whether his outpost served any strategic purpose. Infantry soldiers who deployed to similar valleys in Afghanistan called Restrepo the most accurate combat documentary ever made. They emphasized that the lack of context was precisely the point. Soldiers on the ground don't receive strategic briefings or understand grand plans. They know their patch of dirt, their brothers, and the constant grind of patrols, firefights, and boredom. The film captured the emotional exhaustion of repeated deployments to an outpost named after a fallen friend, the meaninglessness of small tactical victories, and the disconnect soldiers feel when they return home. Veterans praised specific sequences showing troops watching the war from hilltop positions, the absurdity of trying to win hearts and minds while taking fire, and the rawness of interviews where soldiers struggle to articulate their experiences. Directors Sebastian Junger and Tim Hetherington, who tragically died covering Libya in 2011, embedded deeply enough to capture unguarded moments. The film won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, but its real validation came from soldiers who said it showed what they couldn't explain to civilians. The lack of neat explanations or political framing frustrated critics, but resonated with veterans who lived similar confusion and moral ambiguity. Number 8. We Were Soldiers, 2002. Critics dismissed Randall Wallace's film about the Battle of Ia Drang as old-fashioned war movie propaganda that sanitized Vietnam into a tale of heroic Americans fighting honorable enemies. Reviewers complained the film glorified Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore while avoiding the deeper questions about America's presence in Vietnam. They argued the movie's patriotic tone felt dated post-September 11th, and that its focus on tactics over politics made it jingoistic nostalgia. Some critics specifically noted the film portrayed Vietnamese soldiers more respectfully than most Vietnam films, but still centered American heroism at the expense of examining the war's catastrophic mistakes. Vietnam veterans, particularly those who served in the 1st Cavalry Division, praised the film's accuracy regarding the Ia Drang Valley battle in November 1965. They noted the recreation of helicopter assault tactics, the use of artillery support, and the desperate fighting when American forces were surrounded and outnumbered. The real Hal Moore consulted extensively, and the film incorporated details from his co-authored book that veterans recognized. Soldiers appreciated scenes showing the fear of untested troops entering combat, the chaos of helicopters landing under fire, and the importance of leadership during catastrophic situations. The movie's decision to show North Vietnamese commander Nguyen Huy An as a capable, dedicated soldier rather than a faceless enemy earned respect from veterans who fought against professional opponents. The film didn't shy from showing American casualties piling up in brutal close quarters, combat. Veterans also praised the home front scenes, with wives receiving death notifications, arguing those sequences captured military family sacrifice critics overlooked. The movie made over $100 million and became a favorite among military audiences who valued tactical accuracy over political examination. The performances critics dismissed as overwrought reflected genuine breakdowns they witnessed or experienced. The film starred Ryan Phillippe and Channing Tatum and included Joseph Gordon-Levitt in a supporting role, but star power couldn't overcome audience apathy. Veterans argue stop-loss failed because it told uncomfortable truths about how America treats its military, truths that critics couldn't recognize because they never lived them. Number 7. Casualties of War, 1989. Brian De Palma's brutal film about the abduction and assault of a Vietnamese girl by American soldiers shocked audiences and divided critics. Many reviewers called it exploitative, arguing De Palma used graphic violence for shock value and reduced the Vietnamese victim to a symbol rather than a character. Critics questioned whether the film's condemnation of war crimes was undermined by its graphic depiction of them. Some felt the movie's focus on Michael J. Fox's character as the moral objector made the film more about American conscience than Vietnamese suffering. Vietnam veterans had complicated but ultimately validating responses to the film. The movie was based on the real incident at Hill 192 in 1966, and veterans acknowledged that atrocities happened even when most soldiers maintained their humanity. They praised the film for not pretending war brings out only nobility and for showing how unit pressure and moral degradation can create monsters. Former soldiers noted that the depicted retaliation against the character who reported the crime reflected real fears troops faced when breaking ranks. The film's portrayal of combat stress, dehumanization of civilians in a guerrilla war, and the isolation of forward patrols was recognized as authentic. Veterans who spoke about the film emphasized that acknowledging darkness wasn't anti-military, but necessary honesty. The movie bombed at the box office, making barely $19 million against its $22 million budget, possibly because audiences in 1989 didn't want harsh truths about Vietnam. Critics who called it exploitative missed what veterans understood about acknowledging uncomfortable realities. The film's failure to find an audience became its own commentary on how American culture prefers sanitized war stories. Veterans respect the film for depicting what happens when moral boundaries collapse under pressure. Number 6, 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. Michael Bay's film about the 2012 Benghazi attack became politically radioactive instantly. Critics slammed it as right-wing propaganda designed to damage Hillary Clinton before the presidential election, arguing the film pushed a conspiratorial narrative about delayed military response. Reviewers complained Bay's signature action movie style was inappropriate for a politically sensitive tragedy and that the film reduced complex diplomatic and security failures into a simplistic tale of heroes versus bureaucrats. Many critics noted the movie ignored broader context about why the compound was vulnerable. The security contractors who defended the diplomatic compound that night praised the film's recreation of the attack's timeline and the chaotic combat. The real Annex security team members consulted on the film and appeared publicly defending its accuracy regarding the events they experienced. They specifically validated the film's depiction of being told to wait before responding to the initial attack, the inadequacy of security measures, and the confusion about whether military support would arrive. Veterans and contractors noted accurate details like the use of mortars against the Annex, the difficulty of defending spread-out positions, and the fear of being overrun. The film didn't speculate beyond what the security team witnessed, focusing on ground-level combat rather than political decisions. Critics mistook that focus for political agenda when veterans saw accurate tactical recreation. The movie made over $69 million domestically against a $50 million budget, but was overshadowed by political controversy. Former military members argued the film honored fallen contractors without becoming a political hit piece, even if critics and audiences couldn't separate it from election year politics. The validation from the actual team members carries weight that critical reviews can't diminish. Number 5, American Sniper, 2014. Clint Eastwood's blockbuster about Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle ignited a cultural firestorm. Critics divided sharply, with some praising Bradley Cooper's performance while condemning the film as nationalist propaganda that glorified killing and ignored Iraqi perspectives. Reviewers argued the movie presented Kyle as an uncomplicated hero without examining the ethical complexity of his role or questioning the Iraq War's justifications. Some critics specifically condemned scenes depicting Iraqis as savage enemies and accused the film of racism. The controversy exploded across social media, with accusations the film celebrated American imperialism. Navy SEALs and snipers defended the film's portrayal of Kyle's experiences and the psychological toll of repeated deployments. Veterans emphasized the movie actually showed Kyle's deteriorating mental state, his struggles with PTSD, and his difficulty reconnecting with family, all elements critics overlooked in their political analysis. Former military members noted accurate details about sniper overwatch operations, the moral weight of split-second decisions, and the brotherhood among special operations teams. They argued critics wanted a different movie that examined geopolitics rather than accepting a film about one soldier's experience. The film's depiction of Kyle's increasing obsession with protecting his brothers resonated with veterans who understood how combat focus narrows to your immediate team. American Sniper became a massive hit, earning over $500 million worldwide and receiving 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. The real Chris Kyle was tragically killed by a troubled veteran before the film's release, adding painful context. Veterans pointed out that the film's final funeral sequence, with thousands attending Kyle's memorial, reflected genuine respect from military communities. Critics who condemned the film as propaganda couldn't reconcile that assessment with veterans finding emotional truth in Kyle's struggles. Number 4. Fury, 2014. David Ayer's tank warfare film set in the final days of World War II received mixed critical reception. Reviewers praised the visceral tank combat, but condemned certain scenes as unrealistic, particularly the climactic last stand where a disabled Sherman tank crew fights off an SS battalion. Critics argued the film descended into video game logic and undermined its earlier gritty realism, with a finale that felt like propaganda rather than authentic warfare. Some reviewers specifically mocked the film's depiction of German soldiers as incompetent during the final battle. Tank crews and armor veterans rushed to defend Fury's accuracy regarding tank warfare details. They praised the film's recreation of Sherman tank interiors, the mechanical challenges of operating aging equipment, and the terror of facing superior German armor. Veterans noted accurate details like the loader's physical exhaustion, the confined spaces, the importance of crew coordination, and the horrific results when armor is penetrated. Regarding the controversial finale, some military historians and veterans pointed to actual last-stand battles where small units held positions against larger forces through combined defensive advantages. They noted the film showed the Germans making tactical mistakes approaching a disabled tank, which happens in combat. Tank commanders emphasized the psychological accuracy of veteran crews becoming family and the moral erosion of constant combat shown through Brad Pitt's character. The film's training scenes, where tankers worked with actual restored tanks, added authenticity. Fury made over $200 million worldwide and became required viewing for armor enthusiasts. The debate over the finale's realism versus its dramatic license illustrates how critics and veterans weighed different elements. Veterans argue that even if specific details stretch reality, the film captured emotional and tactical truths about armored warfare that Hollywood typically ignores. Number 3. Stop Loss, 2008. Kimberly Pierce's film about soldiers forced back to Iraq through stop-loss orders flopped critically and commercially. Critics called it heavy-handed, melodramatic, and preachy, arguing the film reduced complex policy into a simplistic anti-war screed. Reviewers complained the performances felt overwrought, and the film manipulated audiences with excessive trauma rather than thoughtful examination. The movie bombed spectacularly at the box office, making barely $11 million worldwide, and seemed to confirm that post-Iraq war films couldn't find audiences. Critics wrote it off as a noble failure that couldn't dramatize its political message effectively. Iraq and Afghanistan veterans who watched Stop Loss found it devastatingly accurate about the psychological destruction of repeated deployments. They praised the film for showing the shattered mental states of soldiers cycled through combat tours without adequate recovery time, the broken promise of completed service, and the desperation of troops facing involuntary return to war zones. Veterans highlighted specific scenes showing PTSD symptoms, explosive anger, and the impossibility of readjusting to civilian life as authentic. The film's depiction of stop-loss policy, which extended service beyond contractual obligations, resonated deeply with soldiers who experienced that betrayal of trust. Former service members noted accurate details about homecoming parades that felt hollow, family disconnection, and the temptation to desert rather than redeploy. The movie's commercial failure became proof to veterans that civilian audiences didn't want to confront the real costs of extended wars. Soldiers who praised the film emphasized that what critics called melodrama was actual trauma. The performances critics dismissed as overwrought reflected genuine breakdowns they witnessed or experienced. The film starred Ryan Philippe and Channing Tatum, and included Joseph Gordon-Levitt in a supporting role, but star power couldn't overcome audience apathy. Veterans argue Stop Loss failed because it told uncomfortable truths about how America treats its military, truths that critics couldn't recognize because they never lived them. Number 2, The Hurt Locker, 2008. Catherine Bigelow's film about an explosive ordnance disposal team in Iraq won the Best Picture Oscar and earned critical acclaim. Then bomb disposal experts started talking. Military critics and EOD technicians shredded the film's procedural accuracy, pointing out numerous tactical errors, unsafe practices, and scenarios that would never happen. They noted that Jeremy Renner's character violates basic protocols, acts recklessly endangering his team, and survives situations that demonstrate the filmmakers didn't understand bomb disposal. Veterans flooded forums listing inaccuracies about how EOD teams actually operate. The criticism grew so loud that some questioned whether the film deserved its awards. However, a different group of veterans defended The Hurt Locker on different grounds. They argued critics fixated on tactical procedures while missing the film's psychological accuracy. Combat veterans, including some EOD techs, praised the portrayal of adrenaline addiction, the disconnect from civilian life, and the obsessive focus that develops in high-stress military jobs. They noted the film captured how some soldiers become more comfortable in war zones than at home. The grocery store scene, where Renner's character feels overwhelmed by cereal choices, resonated deeply with veterans experiencing reintegration difficulties. Supporters acknowledged procedural inaccuracies, but emphasized the film got something more important right about the emotional and psychological experience. The movie made over $49 million worldwide on a relatively small $15 million budget and swept the Oscars. The debate between tactical accuracy and emotional truth continues. One EOD tech summarized the divide perfectly in an interview, stating the film showed nothing about bomb disposal, but everything about the kind of person drawn to that work. Critics wanted procedural accuracy. Veterans defending the film valued psychological truth. Both groups were right about different things, illustrating how war films can succeed on multiple levels, even when failing on others. Number 1, Jarhead, 2005. Sam Mendes directed this adaptation of Anthony Swofford's Gulf War memoir, and critics found it boring, pointless, and frustratingly uneventful. Reviewers complained the film had no action, no clear narrative arc, and reduced war to tedious waiting. Critics expected a combat film and received a movie about Marines who never fire their weapons at enemies, instead enduring the psychological torment of desert deployment during Operation Desert Storm. Many reviewers dismissed it as an empty exercise in style that couldn't decide what it wanted to say about war. The film's focus on sexual frustration, mental degradation, and the absurdity of training for combat that never arrives frustrated audiences expecting traditional war movie drama. Marines who served in the Gulf War championed Jarhead as the most accurate portrayal of their experience. They emphasized that their war was exactly that boring, that maddening, and that pointless for most troops involved. Veterans praised the film for showing war as endless waiting punctuated by brief moments of terror or confusion rather than constant action. They noted accurate details about the heat, the psychological games Marines play to maintain sanity, the obsession with infidelity, fears back home, and the crushing disappointment when airstrikes eliminate targets before ground forces engage. The film's depiction of sniper teams preparing for shots they never take, watching oil fires burn, and dealing with false alarms captured the specific frustration of the Gulf War's technological warfare. Marines highlighted the accurate recreation of boot camp's dehumanization and the dark humor that develops in military culture. Jake Gyllenhaal's performance as a Marine, slowly unraveling under boredom and stress, resonated with veterans who experienced similar psychological strain. The movie made over $97 million worldwide, but never found mainstream appreciation. Veterans argue Jarhead's greatest accomplishment was showing that war isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's mind-numbing tedium that destroys you slowly, rather than instantly. Critics wanted excitement. Veterans recognized truth. Here's the reality critics won't admit. You can't review combat authenticity from a theater seat. These 12 films created a battlefield of their own between those who analyze cinema and those who lived the violence. Which side are you on? Drop your most controversial war film opinion below and tell me which movie on this list the critics got most wrong. Should combat veterans have final say on war film accuracy? Or does that perspective blind them to political and ethical failures these films should address? Choose your side and defend it.